So we are going to start these power rankings in just a moment. I'm going to go through the teams, starting at the team that I have power ranked 10th, and we're going to go through, counting up all the way to team 1. When I put a power rank on a team, I'm defining that based on my expectation for where they'll finish over the course of the season, how good they'll be kind of by the end of the year. So I'm aiming this on full year expectations, not how good they're going to be at the start of the season, not what their current form would be if they played right now, but based on over the course of 2021, by World's time or the end of the LCS season, whatever it's going to be. Here's how I think they'll stack up competitively. So it's very much a potential based kind of a power rank, and makes a lot of assumptions about how the team's going to come together, how well they're going to click, and all that kind of thing. Since that is very hard to peg, and since I think putting a team into a single number is really tough and can avoid some nuance, I've done something a little different this year, and I've put a plus minus on every team's rank. So if I say, I rank this team 5th, but I've got a plus minus of 2 on that, that means I think it's pretty likely they're going to finish between 3rd and 7th. So, 2 better than that or 2 worse than that. And it's supposed to be a way to indicate partly, how good they could be if everything clicks really well, and partly if things don't work out, how bad could they be? So like their volatility and their range of possible outcomes, and also an indicator of just my confidence in the opinion I have of them. So if I feel really good, like I really feel strongly that this team's going to finish right around here, I might give them plus minus 1, whatever it's going to be. So that's kind of how the power rankings are going to work, and I'll speak through it more in each team. I've also given each team an off-season grade. So this is a letter grade, anywhere from A+ at the top down to a D at the bottom. I mean, in theory, there could be an F as well, but I think you'd have to go pretty extreme to get an F for me in the off season. And spoiler alert, I haven't given out any Fs this time around. And this grade is basically looking at coming into the season, what resources did you have in your organization? So what players did you have under contract throughout the entire thing? What's my understanding of what kind of budget you have available? So certain teams seem to be more willing or more ready, more able to spend big, and other teams have to be a little more careful with their budget. And so all those kind of resources coming in, and how what did they end up with at once everything had been settled, once all the dust had settled, what did they end up with based on the resources and the tools at hand, and how well did they do? So that's kind of the grade there, and I'll talk through what that grade represents for each team as well. And then we'll just kind of go through those in detail, look a little bit about, what does this team need to do? What has to happen for this team to hit their kind of maximum potential, stuff like that. So hopefully that gives a pretty good idea of how this is going to work, what it's going to look like. And from there, with no further ado, we will start with the team that I have power ranked at number 10. I don't think this is going to surprise anybody. Golden Guardians is my 10th ranked team going into 2021. And this is, I've given them a 10th with a plus minus of 2. I think if things go really well, they might be able to climb up a couple spots. And I've given them an off-season grade of a B. So my thoughts here, obviously they're going into a rebuild year, so you're going to expect they're going to be power ranked very low. If they were going for players who were pretty well established and we're going to be able to win them a bunch of games, that probably wouldn't be doing a very good rebuild, because you need to be looking at players who have been unproven so far and have high potential, so that you can develop them and gain that potential and kind of earn that value into your organization. So I don't think there's a whole lot to say on the rank 10 spot. I think there definitely are ways that their players could end up developing enough that they climb 9th, 8th. I think it would be pretty generous to say that they could finish 7th or 6th by the end of the season. But of course, it's a long year and a lot of things can happen. We definitely didn't go into 2020 spring and say Team Liquid was going to finish 9th, right? Like, very unexpected things can happen. But this is the level of confidence I have in it. I think they've got some players. So their roster, in case you're not familiar with it, we have Niles and Iconic, who are going to be a couple of rookies for top and jungle. We have Ablaze Olive coming up from their academy team to start in the mid lane. Again, another rookie. Stixay is going to be kind of a veteran anchor for them in the bottom lane, and then Newbie as well, coming in with a little more experience. Those kinds of things. So, I think overall, like when I look at a B here, it's kind of like you did I would say my C plus or B minus is kind of like you did kind of just you coasted by on kind of what you needed to do. You didn't make things worse. B is should have a little bit of a positive vibe to it at least. I think they've done the right thing conceptually. I put out a separate video that you can watch on the YouTube channel, saying why conceptually I think them selling off the core of their roster going into this offseason was the right call. So they had Hanser going to free agency, they had Huhi going to free agency, and they still had contracts with Closer, with DeMonte, and with FBI. And, you know, it does feel pretty bad. This is just a quick summary of kind of what I said in the video. It does feel pretty bad when you finished fourth. You know, you were pretty close to going to Worlds, all things considered, especially in a year where it wasn't expected that they'd have an outcome anywhere near that good. In fact, if I go back and look at what I gave them, I had them power ranked 10th 1 year ago at this time, and they ended up fourth by the end of it after, you know, some things changing and some players developing to a level that we probably didn't expect. But, you know, when they had Closer, DeMonte, and FBI, to then take that core and say, we're going to try to win the LCS, you would have had to spend really big. Like, we saw the numbers that were out there for what it would have cost to bring in Licorice. Okay. Yeah, I'm saying they finished. It felt like they finished fourth. Did they not finish fourth in the playoffs? Anyways, they took a series off TSM. Hunter is correcting me. Okay, they finished fifth or sixth, but they felt, honestly to me, they felt like the fourth place team. So the fourth in my heart. We will say that. Yeah, that's right, Cloud9. Okay. So don't believe a thing I say from here on out because I had things so wrong on Golden Guardians. Anyways, they felt like they were pretty close, right? They felt like they were pretty close to being in that top 3 going to Worlds group. But could they have actually afforded to add, first of all, to bring back Huhi on a raise, or to bring back another support who's going to be at least as good or better? That's going to be a big extra cost over what they were paying before. To bring in someone like Licorice and buy that out, or pay for another top laner that similar caliber, if there was somebody like that, you know, that's going to be a really big expense too. And when they looked at that and said, here's what it's going to cost for us to level up from where we finished this time and break into that top 3 and go to Worlds, you know, that kind of value isn't really there based on the trajectory of where we think we are. So, you know, based on all that, I think they made the right call to say, we're going to step back from this. We're going to say, you know, we're not, we thought we were building up to that Worlds run and it didn't happen. Now we're going to reset and build up to it again. And if we can kind of make some money on selling these players, use that money to flesh out our player development over the next couple of years. And then, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, we're in this spot again and even stronger as an organization. And we haven't spent really big at the end of the year. You know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And then after that, what do we have? So that's kind of where I feel the positives are here. And I think that the rebuild does get relatively positive kind of takeaway on how they did it. It's not higher than a B because while I think they've done some good moves on the players they brought in, I'm not completely convinced. So Stixay as the veteran, like, there's a lot, it's really challenging to evaluate whether the veteran anchor, like the mentor type player, is going to be good in that role, because unless you know them personally, know if they're a good teacher. Like, we can look at someone like Aframu and say, look at all the young AD carries he's played with and helped them develop and being a good teacher to them. You know, there's a lot of evidence there, but a lot of other players, you know, you haven't had that same opportunity to see, are they going to be able to teach somebody really well? Are they going to be able to say, like, even keeled and be a good example of, you know, what it means to be a pro and how to learn and grow from that? Stixa hasn't really struck me as that, but I could be completely wrong there. And the fact that I think it was pretty clear to him coming in, this is the kind of project he's going to be joining. The fact that he willingly opts into that is a very good sign. So maybe he'll be okay in that role, but I think his actual on the Rift play, I think in my opinion, he was probably the weakest member of CLG in 2020. I think his level of play has really dropped off really hard. So, you know, he may be really valuable kind of mentally and as kind of a mentor and kind of semi-player coach kind of role, but I think it's going to be really hard for them to win games with him that way. I think a lot of people talk about Niles and how exciting he might be and could pan out to be, and I think that could really happen. I think he's the player that I'm going to be watching the most to see how well he grows and how well he manages to develop, you know, in a roster that's probably not going to win many games. I think that's from a larger perspective, you know, this project's really going to show how much how important it is to a player's development to be winning a little bit versus just losing all the time, and does that set them back? And Niles is going to be a player who's going to potentially be affected by that quite a bit. Iconic. So going into Scouting Grounds, I had a lot of people telling me Iconic is a guy to watch. And I hadn't really seen it myself in his play. I didn't really see it myself at Scouting Grounds, and I'm just personally not convinced. And so there are definitely other people's opinions that I'll take into effect and like modify my own opinions of a player, of a team, or whatever it is, and say, hey, they see something I'm not seeing. I'm going to go back and try to like, you know, a few people will take that on face value and say they know better than I do, and I'm going to trust that. Most of the time I try to like, you know, at least verify it myself, or maybe I'll just disagree and allow myself to disagree with it. This is one where I just don't really see the same things in Iconic's play that I think a lot of other people have. And I'm hoping that I'm just missing it, and that they're more right, because I'd rather see this project succeed than not. I think seeing a rebuild succeed in LCS is good for the LCS. Seeing young North American players succeed is going to be good for the LCS. But I'm not convinced that Iconic's going to be that guy. I think we'll probably see Rosethorn swap in from Academy for at least a few games somewhere in. And I like that they have two players that they can try out, and as long as one of them succeeds, you know, then that's fine. Great for them. So, I mean, and Ablaze Olive is a guy who's been trying to break through for a long time, and I'm really happy to see him get his opportunity, and I hope it pans out. I didn't think he was like a top 2 mid in Academy this year or anything like that. So like, but I think, you know, giving him a good long opportunity in LCS for the year, maybe that'll work out. At the Academy level, of course, when you've got a big rebuild project, you got to look at all 10 players. They've got Tally, Rosethorn, Yunbi, Prismal, and Chime. I'm really hyped about Prismal and Chime. I would love to see these guys get some games at the LCS level. OPTSM fan, thank you for the gift subs. Yeah, one gifted sub there. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Prismal, I think, was pretty impressive at the Academy level. Chime is a guy who has been kind of working in the Golden Guardians organization for a while. I'd really like to see them. I think the Tally is potentially a really good mentor player. Thanks for another sub there, OPTSM fan. Appreciate it. Another gifted one. Yunbi, Rosethorn, both going to be pretty raw, and it's going to take a while. Wow, there's the whole gifted sub chain here. And I was just checking for a second to see whether the sounds are going to be coming through on stream in my recording, and I don't think so, but the good old probe sound effect. But Prismal and Chime are guys that I think have been around in Academy long enough that I'd love to see them make the jump and get a few weeks and see how much they can develop. So really the ones that I'm looking at in this org are going to be like Prismal, Chime, Niles, Blaze Olive. Those are the ones that I think have the highest chance of succeeding in their kind of growth project. But overall, I would have hoped to see at least one more really like grade A prospect with really, really high potential who I think has a great chance to succeed. And I think I probably would have rather had, you know, rather than just Stixay as kind of the one really big veteran mentor, I think a balance of 2 and 3, like 2 veterans, 3 rookies or really young players feels a little better to me. But, you know, this is focusing a lot on the negatives. So when a B should feel fairly positive to me. It's not a B plus, but it's going to depend. And also, just to throw it out there, Golden Guardians, again, were power ranked 10th going into last year, brought a lot of value out of some players that we probably didn't really expect. And maybe they can do it again this year. They've still got the same coaching staff in place. And so I'd love to see that success happen. So that is who I have power ranked 10th. And we'll move on to the next one from there. Let me reveal this one. So at 9, I have Dignitas, and I've got them at a ±2 as well. And, oh boy, this is my D off-season grade. So I think Dignitas has the potential to finish 10th. Golden Guardians could surpass them. I think they could climb a little bit if things click. They've got more of the 2 veteran, 3 new player balance. I feel like I'm definitely going to have to explain and justify the D here a little bit, especially after I gave a B to Golden Guardians, and they're both basically rebuilding, right? When I've said, I think internally, I feel like my reactions to the Golden Guardians rebuild lean positive, and I like it conceptually. I'm not sure about the the execution of it. And then Dignitas come in, they basically got a rebuild going on too, and I know I landed on a D. So here's how I arrived there. Based on, and this is a lot of it is based on kind of rumor and things that I'm not 100% confident in how they happened or why they happened, but the perception I have based on the information that's been out there is that Dignitas did not intend to do a rebuild and that this was a fallback plan for them. They came in thinking they're going to spend, they're going to bring in a couple of big imports. We saw names like the Nemesis Crownshot duo attached to them. We saw names like Sneaky attached to them as like things they might have been pursuing and were hoping to do, and then obviously didn't work out, or they chose against it for whatever reason. The fact that they came in, and I mean, first of all, I also, one of the very first kind of Tim's Takes videos I did was when they announced that they had re-signed Dardoch, and that was like the first domino in their off-season chain. If you're intentionally going into a rebuild year, I don't think Dardoch is the guy that you re-sign and make that like, we're going to rebuild around Dardoch, right? And it's not that he's a bad player. I think he's fine. I actually thought, I had a lot more negative opinion of Dardoch before this 2020 season than after, once he came in and actually played fairly well. Like, he's not a star, but, he's got his ups and downs. He's got his own play style to him, but he did, did fairly well. And I didn't really have a problem with him. I think he's an LCS level jungler. Great. But if you're going to rebuild, I'm not sure that's the player you do it around. Aphromoo does very much fit that role. So I think whether you were going for, we're going to try to, climb up the playoff ladder and maybe even reach for top 3, all that kind of stuff, or you're going for rebuild, I think Aphromoo is a great player to retain either way. But if they start with re-signing Dardoch, and then they're going out and looking at these, potentially fairly high-cost veterans, or a player like, bringing back a player like Sneaky out of kind of not being an LCS, stuff like that, and then it doesn't work out, and now you're very late in the offseason that it didn't work out, because everything we've seen with the Dignitas moves has come very late in the offseason. And now you're like, oh, okay, that's not going to work out. Let's go for young players instead. But now you're delayed, even if it's only a few days, and I think it was more than that. I think, now you've got really low options on what you can do with those players. We didn't see, we don't know what's going on with their academy team. I don't think any information has been released on that yet that I've seen still. And we didn't see so it is Fake Gods, Soligo, and Neo that they're going to be running. Neo wasn't announced until, I think, yesterday. We saw Fake Gods show up in the contract database for Cloud9, that they had signed him for Cloud9 Academy, and then Dignitas, it seems like, had to pay Cloud9 some money to get him out after him being on contract with C9 for only a couple of days. Like, you're literally throwing money away because you switched into a rebuild so late in your offseason plan. Their coaching staff, as far as I can tell, still isn't completed. They didn't release their previous head coach until late in the offseason. They didn't sign their new head coach until obviously much later in the offseason. It just seems like they don't have a certain order they want to do things in. Like, hey, first of all, we should reset our coaching staff to where we want it to be. Then we should decide, are we loading up or are we rebuilding? What's our plan A, what's our plan B? Then we execute that, and we need to decide if we're going to pivot from plan A to plan B. We got to decide that really early, and just, so we don't basically screw ourselves over by waiting too long and running out of options. And it seems like they did things in the wrong order. They pivoted too late, and they had to pay a buyout for a player that was supposed to be a free agent. They ended up with some players, that at the end of the day, like, I think they're pretty lucky to land where they landed. Like, Fake God, I think, was a pretty good player to pick up for a project like this and for a bit of a rebuild kind of a thing. Soligo is a player kind of like a Blaze Olive who's been in that group. He's had a few games in LCS. He's trying to break through to the next level, and I think he's one that you can give that shot and see how it works out. Neo, playing as Asta in Academy, came in kind of late in the year in Academy, and I thought he played pretty well, and I think he's got some potential. With those 3 players, as long as one of them pans out pretty well, I think you've done pretty well and set yourself up in a good spot. But I think they got there in a really inefficient way, in a way that I'm pretty unhappy with, and they still don't even have an Academy roster, and there aren't that many players to pick from anymore. So, like, the next wave coming behind these guys isn't really there. I am like, if I was only judging this based on the state of their project and where it's at, I might be more in the C+ range. But the process they followed to get here just really leaves me pretty disappointed. So, I'm hoping it works out well for them. I think there's a chance that it could work out fairly well. They could climb up kind of into that 7th spot if things go well. If Aphromoo can really guide Neo a lot and teach him, I think that could be good. I think Fake God and Dardoch could make a pretty good top side of the map, or Fake God can play kind of those more of a kind of weak side roles. Let Dardoch do a little more of the carrying. Soligo could pan out. I think there's always a chance of that. Anybody in that group, so it could work. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to come together either way, but I really hope the main thing is that Dignitas learns from this, that they need to get their ducks in a row, and they need to do things. They need to know what is the right way to build an organization and build a team, because they seem very, very scattered. Moving on from there, at 8th, I have Immortals. And again, I think this is a +-2. I know that going 2-2-2 all the way here makes that ± feel like it's not super nuanced, but there's a little bit of variation coming up in a bit. And I have a B- here. So I think that the roster Immortals put together, so they ended up with Revenge, Xerxes, Insanity, Raze, and Destiny. And of course, there were other changes that they made. Did a little bit of a coaching staff reset, bringing in Giotto, coming from Origin. And of course, Xerxes and Destiny both played for him in Origin in the LEC. I think Immortals came into this offseason with relatively limited resources, in the sense of like, who did they have under contract that they could continue to work with? What did they have for perceived kind of budget to spend? What did they have in academy that they might be able to move up and work with? And I think that they had to start with very little. They didn't have the Golden Guardian situation where they've got, these 3 really strong players that they can sell and use that to fund their next acquisitions, things like that. They had to kind of scrape together something out of very little. So they've ended up in, sticking with one player. I like having some continuity of roster from one season to another, and so they have Insanity carrying over. He's kind of their young mid laner. I like seeing this level of NA mids, where you have, Insanity, you have Soligo, you have a Blaze Olive, all trying to kind of be that next guy to break through, whether that's that next Demonte or the kind of the guy who exceeds him. Xerxes, again, to me, I don't know if he's got the personality to be a good mentor. He might, but, I think we're going to have to see. I think his level of play in the LEC, I felt very strong about Xerxes like a year ago or a couple of years ago, but I didn't watch a ton of Origin. I have VOD reviewed some of their games. I didn't feel good about his fundamental knowledge of how to play out a map state, or, what he needs to do for his laners, what his laners need to do for him, things like that. So I don't have a great sense of him being that kind of mentorship kind of a veteran. That's one reason that I lean to the lower side on the B- side. Revenge is a guy who didn't really stick out a ton to me at Academy, but I know that he's really, really strong in solo queue, and I know that the coaching staff that picked him up knows that kind of thing about, individual player mechanics and potential really well. So, I'm hoping that they see, again, something that I don't see with him, but if it's leaning purely on my own assessment of him as a player, I'm not super confident in what Revenge is going to bring. Raze and Destiny hopefully will be a bright point for them. Destiny does have some pretty good experience. He's spent time in the LEC again, being coached by Giotto there. Didn't finish the season with the team, which isn't a great sign, but I think as a player, he's still got some good stuff to offer. And on the Academy side, they only just announced this. They announced they have Tapoon, Potluck, Pretty, Keith, and Joey. So a couple of players there, like Potluck, they've been working with for a little while. And Pretty is coming in. I don't know a lot about him. I haven't had time to kind of look into him more, but a couple of guys there that, Keith is kind of the Academy level veteran. Tapoon's been around for a while. Joey's been in and out. Like a couple of guys that can move up. The reason that I land like B- on them, I think that they have a little bit less of the kind of talent or prospect potential than Golden Guardians. But I feel a lot better about their rebuild project than Dignitas, because because they clearly came into it intentionally with a plan, and this is what we want to do. This is our plan A. We want to rebuild. We want to stock up. And then it just comes down to like, what are your, how well did you execute on the actual players? So a B minus, anything with a minus feels kind of bad. I don't think B minus should feel bad here. I think it's decent. I think what they're doing has a chance to work out. More OPTSM fan gifting subs. And I hope that, I hope they have a couple of these players pan out really well, but I'm a little skeptical that they're going to be able to win a whole lot of games. And they must be seeing something in some of these players again that I'm not quite seeing. I feel a little bit of doubt on a couple of the players they picked up. So those are the first 3 teams I want to talk about. And now I know there have been a lot of questions coming through in chat. So, and I've just been powering through this. So I'm going to scroll up a bit and try to catch a couple of these questions before we move on from there. I know St. GM had a question. Does the league have an NBA style trade deadline? And it does. That may be changing. There have been rumors that the format for LCS next year is going to be changing away from kind of spring split, summer split divide and all that kind of stuff. But up until now, it has been that I think around week 7 or so of a split, you can't add players or remove players from, or I guess you technically kind of can remove, but you can't add players to your roster anymore. So there are deadlines on that. I'm not sure how that'll work if they end up combining things into one full length season. Lokodoku recognizes the probe sound from StarCraft. That's my sub sound. Can I prove with stats that Gross Score is a better TF player? I absolutely cannot. We're going to get into the teams with a non ±2 in a minute. And I know there were also comments about how how can you have a ±2 when you're at, how can you have a 9 -2 and be lower than that? Well, it's just because I didn't want to remove the minus and have it look visually asymmetrical, okay? It's annoying to do that. Visual asymmetry sucks. All right. Yeah, so, and Fab is asking, Geelseer, thank you very much for the Prime sub. Isn't Beef pretty generous for Immortals? Sorry, no, the scroll is doing weird stuff to me. Isn't Beef pretty generous for Immortals? He said. Anyways, oh yeah, there we go. Are any of their moves that great? So, I don't know. I don't feel like B is super generous. I think it's kind of like you did things kind of around the level, like kind of on par, a little bit above par. and like I said, I think the main thing is they went into an intentional rebuild and they actually executed to their plan. And then beyond that, it's execution details. So, I don't think it's super generous. Show you TSM in 7th. Yeah, we're not going there. And also, when I'm talking through this verbally, I feel like every now and then I miss a point. I know when I was talking about Dignitas, I didn't mention anything about the Johnson situation. We can circle back to that a little bit while I'm taking a bit of a breather here. That was another point that made me rate Dignitas lower is they sold Johnson with a year left in his contract and promoted Neo, who also has a year left in his contract. And it seems pretty clear that they sold that hoping to use that money to fund their other acquisitions that didn't pan out. And so now they've ended up with a rebuild project without their one player who has only played 1 year and proved that he's a really good prospect to build towards. And so they kind of lost a piece that should have been the center of their rebuild project, but that didn't really happen. I don't know anything about the sneaky deal falling through. That was just little rumors out there. Whether there was an actual Nemesis crown shot option in place, I don't actually know. These are just rumors that I heard out there. So, all right. And again, on the Johnson thing, it just looking at the timing of how these things played out, I'm making assumptions and kind of connecting the dots on how I think it played out. I'm pretty sure they sold him, since they seemed to sell him relatively early. It seems like that was part of their plan A without realizing that it blew up their plan B. But maybe it worked out differently. And if so, they can feel free to go out and say that and defend themselves on how that worked out. Okay. We're going to move on to team number 7. I'm curious what people predict on who I have number 7. I'm actually going to have to reveal it to my mind is in a lot of places. So, number 7, I have not super hard to predict this one. I do have CLG, and look, I have a 7th ±3, and I gave them a C for their offseason grade. So yes, in the written version of this, by the way, where I go into a little more structured reasoning for all of these, is up on my Patreon and will go out on oracleselixir.com tomorrow as well, by the way. So CLG ±3. So I think basically by giving them a ±3, I'm saying if everything goes horribly, they could bomb out and go 10th. If everything clicks together super well, these guys could climb up into kind of that 4th or 5th range. So I think it's possible. But that should also indicate that I think there's a lot of volatility in how this group of players could work out, and what might happen with them. So the roster they've ended up with: Finn, Broxa, Pobelter, Wild Turtle, and Smoothie. I give them a C mostly because I think they had an opportunity this offseason to join some of these other teams and go into a rebuild project and say, look, we're not going to go to Worlds. Based on what we have right now going into this offseason, the resources, the player resources we have, the spend that we can lay out to augment what we have, we're not going to go to Worlds this year. And if we're not going to go to Worlds this year, we better be setting ourselves up to go to Worlds next year or the year after that. Moving ourselves forward on a longer term plan. And they didn't do that. Like, they signed basically a bunch of veteran names that pretty well what you're going to get from them. You know what you're going to get out of Broxa. You're maybe hoping you're going to get a little more than TL got out of him because he didn't pan out to the level they wanted. You know what you're going to get out of Wild Turtle. Like, this guy's been around forever. He had, a downswing through part of the year and then finished off the year, I thought, really strong with FlyQuest. You kind of know what you're going to get there, and maybe, again, you hope you can coax a little bit higher performance out of him. On Finn, I think Finn is actually the part that I feel most confident about in what they've done here, because he's the kind of the least established veteran player of all of this, and I think he's got, his stocks tanked so hard based on the way the year played out for him and for Rogue, and how hard he got scapegoated a lot of the time for whenever things did go wrong with Rogue, and I think that was a little unfair. So I think he's a player who you could kind of buy low on and maybe get a little more value out of. But overall, you've ended up with like 4 very established veterans and 1 leaning younger kind of a player, and that's not a rebuild, right? That's a team that you'd like to think, we think we're going to do a little bit of a 2020 Golden Guardians thing and get more out of these guys than anyone expects, and like make a run and try to impress some people. But I really, really feel like this was an offseason where they should have gone in and said, no, we're going to hold on to 2 veteran players. We're going to load up on 3, young players or rookies, and we're going to, build for the next season from there. Try to build up some organizational depth that we can either leverage to sell those players and have more money to load up next time. Develop some guys that we can hold on to longer term, whatever it's going to be. And I just philosophically just don't agree with the way they approach this offseason. So that's a large part of where my C comes from. And at the same time, with the players that they have the LCS level, they could load up behind them on the academy side. I think you can both try to win now and develop players. That's kind of one of the main points of academy. What they've ended up with in academy, and this one also, if I'm remembering right, got announced a little bit later than some of the academy teams. So they have Thien, they have Wiggly, RJS, who was playing under the name Deus this season in top lane, and he's swapped back to mid lane. They have Katsuri, and they have Otto. So I actually feel pretty good about keeping Wiggly around. I thought that he had very, very little chance to succeed on CLG this year, and obviously he didn't look good, but I think he still feels a little more on the inexperienced or younger side to me, and I think you can get more potential out of him. I don't think, in hindsight, looking back over the whole year, I don't think you'd keep him at the LCS level. Like, he's not going to, if you're going to keep 2 veterans and have 3 rookies, you're not going to keep Wiggly as one of those 2 guys. I think Pobelter and Smoothie make a little more sense on that to me. But I do think he's a guy that you could give him more time in academy, see if he finds his footing back, finds his confidence back, and on a performance level, he can kind of anchor your academy squad to help them win some games and help your other rookies there kind of get more experience. So I'm good with that one. I don't know a lot about Thien and Katsuri, but I know that both these guys, have been around for a little while in other scenes. Maybe there's more that you can get out of them. Otto has, is a guy who recently swapped to support, and might have some ceiling he hasn't explored yet. So he's kind of on that kind of prospect curve. And then RJS is probably one that I'm kind of excited about, and I hope that he'll get some time again, like he did come up in LCS and play a couple of games. And I'm hoping that he can kind of pan out as a good prospect for them. But again, this crop of 5 players doesn't scream like big development project, and we're gonna hope to find one big star out of this group, or 2 or 3 serviceable players. It's kind of like that academy roster is there, and you might get something out of it. I don't feel thrilled about it. So I think that they could have had a stronger offseason performance if they had a more exciting or stronger core of real legit rookies or grade A prospects that they had managed to put together an academy, but they didn't quite there. So, there's a chance that these guys, that they do get more value out of all these veterans that they've assembled, and that Finn ends up being kind of the guy who really shines through, and carries a lot more, or like whether it's a direct carry player or whether it's, the top lane, like utility type carrying, whatever it's going to be. I think he can be a lot better than people are going to expect. And if all of that works out, I do think these guys can surprise and take a lot of games off of some other teams. But even if they do, I don't think that's setting up the CLG organization for the trajectory that this should be on at this point. Even if these guys finish like as high as 4th, which is what that ±3 says, I think they might be able to achieve if everything goes perfectly. It doesn't get you to Worlds, and it doesn't set them up on the longer term trajectory that I'd wish they had been on. So that is how I feel about CLG. Okay, number 6. Trying to keep an eye on chat a little bit, but it's moving pretty fast. And I find that my thought process gets derailed fairly easily. So, no, don't take it personally. Number 6, FlyQuest. Papa Smithy says, chat's moving so fast, no one can see. And I didn't actually see the end of his message because chat moved too fast. I think he used the 100T emote. Okay. Whoa. Gene gifted 5 tier 1 subs. Thank you very much. Okay. FlyQuest, number 6. This is the one where it might start to surprise a couple of people, where I have a couple of these. We went back to the +/-2. I know. I give them an A- for their off season. And this, I was waffling quite a bit between A-, B+. How do I feel about it? At the end of the day, I had, part of the reason I had to go with an A- is because they have a bunch of Canadians on that roster. And in the written version, I've got like this really great, this really great A- joke. I mean, it's so good. You should subscribe to the Patreon just in order to see that joke 12 hours early. No, it's not. I make dad jokes. I'm a dad. It's just what it is. So FlyQuest, they did a full reset of their entire roster, right? They had Solo, Centaur, Power of Evil, Wild Turtle, Ignar. They go to Worlds. They, release a couple of those guys, sell a couple of those guys. Power of Evil was an opt-out on Centaur and was a free agent. Power of Evil opted out of his player option, whatever it is. So I think their roster was breaking up no matter what they did. And I think they would have been talking to these guys, maybe even during the Worlds run, definitely after, and saying, can we keep this together, maybe augment a little bit? Can we bring Centauran back? And, we just had our best year as an org. We had great branding work. It seemed like the fans really got on board. Obviously, we went to Worlds. We went to both finals in the LCS. But I think it probably became clear to them fairly early on, this thing's breaking up no matter what. Like, whatever we say, Centauran's ready to move on somewhere else and go to Team Liquid in this case. Power of Evil wants to try something else. If those two guys are gone, or potentially even if only one of them is gone, like maybe if Centauran leaves but Power of Evil is willing to stay, maybe even then you say, we don't think we can get back to Worlds with that. So you might as well shift things up and rejig it a little bit. So they sell Ignar. They move on from Wild Turtle. They move on from Solo. I can't speak exactly to the individual decision-making on each of those, but they move all of this on. And they end up buying a core of 3 players from Cloud9, Licorice, Palafox, and Diamond. And they also buy Johnson from Dignitas. And then they brought in Jose Deodo from the LLA. So there's some, there's a pretty strong youth movement here, but also some really good veterancy. Obviously, Licorice is going to be your kind of really established veteran. Jose has been playing pro for a few years, right? He's also a relatively veteran player. It's going to be a new environment for him, and that changes things a bit. And then, Johnson has been around for a year. Palafox, Diamond are your kind of true rookies. So this is a really interesting balance of experience and youth, but it's also, like players who are developing on a very good curve. I think Palafox is on a really good curve coming out of Academy. He was probably the best mid laner. Like Demonte was in Academy in spring, and Demonte was a stronger mid laner than Palafox in spring. But Palafox was in Academy the whole year and showed, a pretty good growth curve, especially spiking really hard over the last part of the year. And I think he did stand out a little bit ahead of some of those other Academy mids that we've been mentioning, and some of the other teams that Blaze Olive, Soligo, Insanity. I think Palafox either is better than them or definitely has the potential to be better than them. And so I think what they've assembled is a team that can compete. Definitely. Like they can compete mid of the table. If things go really well, they might be able to climb a little bit, but I don't think you need to go to Worlds with this lineup because you've got a really good youth movement coming, and you can build with that going forward. So you've got, a little bit more of a balanced mix of, we're not going to hard reset and do the traditional sports idea of like tanking out the season because you're not going to tank for a draft pick kind of thing. It's not the same thing. You can try to have youth and try a little bit to win now. And I think they've struck a good balance there. I think it's pretty easy to think you could subtract a lot of points from them for the fact that they had to buy 4 of these players. And I think there have been, I don't know if it's actually reported, just rumors out there, they had to buy a little bit, or they had to pay a little bit to get Jose Deodo, I think, as well, but that's probably not super relevant. But that only matters if you had to pay, I think more than was necessary for these guys. And given the reporting that came out about Licorice's buyout cost and how it dropped over the course of the offseason and the market wasn't there so much for him, and it seems like, and I'm doing a lot of assumptions and connecting dots here, but it seems like they waited out, FlyQuest waited out the offseason fairly well, managed to get the Licorice, Palafox, and Diamond deal, and I bet you it cost a lot less than Cloud9 originally hoped they would get for those players. So just making assumptions from the outside, I'm guessing FlyQuest probably got, probably didn't spend as much on acquiring all these players as it might seem on the surface and as a first kind of gut reaction, but I don't actually know. And if they did pay a much higher price than what I think might be reasonable, then we could knock that down to a B+ or a B or whatever it is. But I think they've put themselves on a really good trajectory. I think they can win some games. And at the Academy level, I think they've done a pretty good job too. So they've ended up with Kumo, NXI, Triple, Tomo, and Dreams. Kumo is one I don't feel great about that one. I think he had his chance in the LCS. I think he came down to Academy and didn't perform that great personally. I don't think he showed that he's ready to kind of start that redemption arc and bring himself back up to that level. I probably would have done something else in the top lane. NXI is like super raw rookie coming out of scouting grounds, played the tail end of the year with 100 Thieves Next. Very raw NA jungler, but I think he's got a lot of potential, and giving him a full year in Academy could be really, really good. And you find out whether you've really got something there. Triple is a veteran presence to kind of anchor Academy. Tomo had half a year on Cloud9 Academy, and I think is a decent kind of like B tier prospect that might pan out, might not. And then you have Dreams, who, is a little bit more of a surprise move because he's coming out of playing in, LEC level. I think you look at that one and say, you hope it's a move to kind of push Diamond a little bit and teach him somewhat. And so, yeah, that one is a little more curious, but you can see it as one to be a little bit. You could also be teaching Tomo, right? Like we've seen that a really good support can also teach the AD carry quite well. Core JJ and tactical, all that kind of stuff. So, they could be signing him as help develop our Academy team. They could be signing him as a try to play your way into LCS. And if you do, and it helps us win more games, great. If it helps Diamond kind of push himself harder, great. We win there too. So, I think it's a little bit of a surprising move, but it does kind of make sense as a good move. So I think they've done quite well on the LCS front. I think they've done quite well on the Academy front, and they've set themselves up longer term. And they also managed to, the money that they put out to get some of these players, they offset some of that, selling Ignorance contract, whatever else. So I think A- off season, I think they executed it really well. Obviously a huge sweep. And I think they've got potential to perform pretty well, but I don't think you would judge the success of their actual season by like getting to Worlds or anything like that. I think you judge it by the growth that these players actually go through and set themselves up for 2022 and beyond. So, Swagasaurus, the GM of FlyQuest, is in chat saying Dreams is not a contingency plan, so he should get an F+. That's, self-assessments. It'd be interesting to see all these GMs kind of self-assess and see if any of them think, if, in hindsight, whether they should have done things differently. But that would be the kind of content that would never exist because it's really not smart. So we got some more predictions in chat. We're going to move on to number 5 in a second. I got to catch my breath. Get a sip of coffee. Okay, number 5. Some people predicting EG, some people predicting TSM. I am going to put up number 5 here. I have EG, and I have them as a ±1, and I give them a B+. So, this is one where I think, man, the EG offseason could have played out so differently. Their team could look very different with basically one player. But let's get to that in a second. So they went into the offseason with Huni and Kumo in the top lane. They had swapped those two guys, and they had swapped kind of Jizuke and Golden Glue in the mid lane. They had Svenskeren in jungle, and then Bang and Zazel in the bottom lane. And now going into 2021, they have Impact in the top lane because they sold Huni to TSM, and they released Kumo. He may have been a free agent, I don't remember. They've retained Svenskeren. I'm not sure if it's been officially announced, but I'm assuming that they're running Jizuke in mid lane again. I think we would have heard something different if that was not the case. And they've got Deftly and Ignar in the bottom lane. And that's not, from what we've heard in reports, that's not what was supposed to happen. They were supposed to sell Huni to TSM and buy Lost from TSM out of TSM Academy. And that would have been their bottom lane. And to be completely upfront here, if they had managed to secure Lost and bring him in, I would be power ranking them 3rd right now. Lost is really good and would have been a great pickup, and also more future, I think a little bit more of a future-oriented pickup because he's still developing and still improving. So it feels really bad that the way the TSM situation played out and Doublelift ending up retiring and then TSM saying we're going to keep Lost and work with him, and now Evil Geniuses can't have Lost, and that happens all kind of late in the offseason. And so now all the bot lane options that maybe they were looking at, maybe they were competing for Johnson, maybe they were competing for some other options here. But now those options are off the table. There are some players that you might wonder, like, why didn't they bring in Cody-san or something like that? And, they might, I assume they've got some reasons there. I don't know what those reasons are, but, clearly they looked at some of those options there, and other teams did as well, right? Cody-san and some other players don't have a team for whatever reason. And they said, okay, well, we're scrambling. These ones aren't for us. We're going to use Deftly, who is in our academy team, and move him up and, hope that works out the best we can. So Deftly is fine. Like, I don't think he's going to like solo lose them a bunch of games or anything. But he's not the level of kind of step up big primary carry that Lost can be. And when you bring in Impact in your top lane, usually that means you're going to try to play through mid and bot and kind of the bot side of the map. And you want to have the most carry potential you can out of your bot lane. That doesn't mean it's the only way these guys are going to play. I think the coaching staff will try to get, a strong top side with Impact and Svenskeren. If they can make that happen, I will be so there for it. I really would love to see Impact carrying some more games, and I think he can do that. I don't feel like Impact can't carry for what it's worth. I feel like he's not good at being a pressure point in the laning phase, which is not the same thing. But often playing a carry champion and pressuring your lane kind of goes together because you pull up jungle resources to kind of support that pressure, which means you're resourcing into your top laner one way or another. So it's not quite the same thing. I feel like Impact can carry, but he isn't a good lane pressure kind of a player. So now they've got a team that feels a little imbalanced because Deftly, I think, is going to be you'd more like to put him on, especially with Ignar being there, who loves to roam. You'd like to put Deftly on more kind of like survival bot laners and play into the top side of the map more often. Ignar roaming mid, Ignar roaming top, backing up Svenskeren, so Svenskeren can be a little more of the invade player that he has been certain times in the past. I think it's just not, the roster balance isn't what it was supposed to be. So it feels pretty bad. I think Evil Geniuses are going to struggle to break into definitely into top 3. I think that's very unlikely. I think they're going to sit around that kind of... I still am always tempted to say top 6 is kind of playoff cutoff, but the structure changing, whatever it is and stuff like that is kind of different. So, but sitting in that kind of 4th, 5th, 6th range, I think is where they're going to play out the season. I think Jizuke is better than a lot of people give him credit for. I think they do have some pretty strong things that they can work with Ignar and with Jizuke. I think Impact is a very good player. I just don't think they have the right team dynamic that they were supposed to have. And their academy team has not been announced yet, but I have a lot of confidence in the staff they have and the way they approach this kind of stuff. And there have been some rumors out there, and I feel like they are probably doing some very good things at the academy level. So that moves my grade up a little bit there, probably from the B to the B+. But yeah, ultimately the Evil Geniuses offseason just feels like a story of it was going to be something really great, but the carpet got pulled out from under them, and maybe they should have planned a little better, that they could have had a stronger fallback option, but it just didn't work out that way. So that is what I have at spot 5. I love all the conversation in the chat, by the way, guys. When I'm done going through all these rankings, happy to talk over some of this feedback and other kind of chat discussions and so on. Hopefully everybody's being civil, because that's what I'm all about. So yeah, let's move on. Number 4, I think. Lokodoko thinks I'm going Team Liquid number 4. I think that'd be pretty spicy. That would be interesting. What do we got? I got to see which GMs are in chat. Maybe I make a quick change, by the way. Maybe I make a quick change. No, I don't make a quick change. It's all written down. People on Patreon would notice. And number 4, I have 100 Thieves. I've got them on a ±3, and I give them an A-. Fly wants to know where Rogue ranks in the LCS, but I'm not going there. Okay. Yes, so the hoodie org, 100 Thieves. They're only here to sell hoodies and also win Valorant tournaments. Okay. 100 Thieves, I think if everything goes really well and the teams above them don't click, could be good enough to win the LCS. So that's why I've got them on the kind of the +3 potential. But I also think that the Golden Guardians roster core that they brought in, and I'll go over this in a second, but those 4 Golden Guardians players they brought in, put them alongside Someday. There's a chance that they bought at the peak of those guys' value and that things don't click, whether it's meta or whatever else, and it just kind of tanks. So they went into the offseason with Someday, contracts, Ryoma, Cody, Sun, and Poom. They ended up with Someday, Closer, Demonte, FBI, and Huhi. I do think this is a big upgrade on their actual competitive potential of what they had in the other roster. I think, obviously, you're going to hit the ground running a lot harder than some of these other rosters will, because you've got the whole Closer, Demonte, FBI, Huhi, all these guys spent the entire year together, and now you're just adding Someday, and Someday is incredibly, he can play everything and do whatever the team needs. And I've said this many times, but, coming into the LCS, Someday has kind of been this, he's going to try to crush his lanes and carry games and do everything, like carry the whole team on his back. But watching Someday back in the day, what I always enjoyed the most was like Someday Maokai, stuff like this, like TP flanking and tanking and stuff like this. And I think one of the things that I've always said about 100 Thieves and Someday is I wished they could have more lane pressure in the other parts of the map so that he didn't have to feel the need to always play lane dominant kind of stuff and have, the games get lost if the enemy team managed to shut him down in lanes and do stuff like that. So I like that they have like a lane like FBI and Huhi with him, because these guys were the strongest laning 2v2 in the LCS this year. They, lots of kill lanes and applying a lot of pressure, taking turret plates and stuff like that. So they've got that. They can now play through the bottom lane, and Someday doesn't have to feel the need to, he can play, more of a weak side role at times and be fine on that. Demonte obviously, loves to roam and affect the side lanes. Maybe that's good for Someday if they want to play kind of a roaming mid laner with pressure on both side lanes, whatever it's going to be. I think they have a lot more flexibility with this roster than they had before. What else can I say about this lineup and how it might play out? Closers is a really good jungler as well. So overall, I think this team could work out in very effectively. But I don't have them in the top 3, right? And I think that's partly because, the rest of the LCS definitely, like the teams I have above them, I think have leveled up quite a bit, especially the top 2 teams. And taking, a pretty good team from this year and upgrading the top lane position when Hauntzer wasn't a weak point or anything, like he was, I think he was fine. He wasn't amazing, but he was fine. And taking that top lane position and upgrading it a notch or even 2 notches, but in the rest of that core, like I don't know if that's enough to match the growth that the rest of the league has had. I also think that if the meta leans a lot throughout the year, and especially towards the end of the year, towards like needing a much bigger kind of strong pillar in the mid lane and playing a lot of kind of classic high resource carries and stuff like that, where it's not so much in kind of the zone where you get the most value out of Damonte, like what he played in the clutch days or things like that, then you're also going to be in a little bit of a worse position than you got from Golden Guardians when they, were beating TSM in a best of 5 and stuff like that. So, I see some concerns that that this roster might not be. I'm not saying it'll be worse in 2021 than it was in 2020, because I think someday is a good enough player that won't happen. But I think it might not be better enough to make the difference and kind of carry them into that top 3 group. And that's where my kind of concerns lie. But I do land an A- on them, which, again, I feel like the phrase A- always feels a little bit negative, but it's very positive. A- is very good. And that's because they managed to level up their LCS roster. They have really, really good youth movement coming from the academy side that flowed up from their 100 Thieves Next amateur program. Kenvi is probably the biggest prospect in academy right now for next year. Tenacity is a very good prospect as well. Poom still has a lot of room to grow. I actually thought, when I was kind of projecting what they might do this offseason, I had Poom as a player that they could continue to work with at the LCS level, and just say, like, assuming that he grows well over the offseason, obviously his last few games, last few weeks in LCS didn't feel great, but, he seems to have a really good attitude and be a good learner, and maybe he can kind of grow up and be LCS level. And then 100 Thieves also have Ryoma and Luger to be a bit more of an anchor point there. And I don't know a ton about Luger, and I need to do more kind of research on that. I haven't had time to dig into him really deep. But even if it was only like Tenacity, Kenvi, and Poom, that's a really good youth movement already. And so they've got a ton of organizational depth that I feel really good about. It's an A- and not an A, mostly because I don't know that they had to rework themselves quite this hard, or spend the amount that I'm guessing or assuming they had to spend to buy those closer Damonte and FBI core, and pay the raise who he needed. I think that if they had held on to contracts, who I thought played really well with Someday and was a player who was absolutely worth holding on to, if they had held on to Poom and continued to work with his growth curve, and then, even with, in game, I thought Cody Sun was doing fine. If they had found that big laning pressure point in the mid lane, and the challenge always was, like, who's that player that they might be able to get in the mid lane? Like, who's the actual name? You can't just say, find a strong laning, high pressure point mid laner and do that. They're like, well, okay, who do you mean? Like, who's actually available? What's out there? And I didn't really have a great answer to that, so I don't fault them too much there. But conceptually, I thought they didn't need to rework their entire roster. They didn't need to pay all these buyouts in order to be still in that top 4 range and still have all their youth coming up. And potentially, now that they've brought in closer Damonte, FBI, and Huhi, they've actually made it very difficult for themselves to move players up from Academy into LCS a year from now, unless they, I'm not sure what the status of those contracts are, whether they have team options that they could, that they could exercise and move the players up from that. Maybe they end up selling those players onwards, and I hope that they make a profit on them. But even if they don't, as long as they aren't losing a ton of money selling them onwards, then that's fine. But these are the things that, and they're pretty nitpicky on why I landed on an A- rather than an A, because I think they have kind of put a cap on their talent pipeline a little bit, and I feel kind of bad that they had to move on, or that they chose to move on from contracts as well. So again, nitpicks. I think they have set themselves up really well I hope that their amateur and academy teams succeed next year and that these players get to be promoted. It does strike me a little odd that they would bring in Golden Glue as like complete rookie coach to work with these players who are so crucial to get coached really well and get, like, this year is going to be so important to get the most out of Kenby and Tenacity especially. And to bring in a coach who hasn't done it before seems a little imbalanced, but hopefully that pans out as well. And I don't think he's going to ruin the coaches or anything. So, or ruin the rookies or anything. But there's a little bit of risk there, I would say. So, that's where I land on 100 Thieves. So, moving on from there. Gonna catch my breath again. So Fly, the GM of Rogue, says that he agrees with me all the way so far, which means every other comment that is happening in this chat doesn't mean anything. So we're doing well. That's what you have to do as a content creator doing this type of content. Find the people who agree with you and ignore everybody else. That's the play. That's how you do it. No. Okay, I think I'm ready. We are going to... by the way, we'll plug something here. A couple of days from now, we're going to be doing the next episode of the True Sight podcast, and Jensen Go, the head coach of Immortals Academy, is going to be on the True Sight podcast. And if you check out the Patreon, or I'll link it on Twitter in a bit, or link it on Discord as well, you'll be able to submit questions to ask him and things like that. I'm sure he will have watched everything that I've said here and be ready to give me all the convincing arguments on the things that I have wrong, and also all the things that he likes that I've said. He's going to prop those up. It's all going to be about me and my content when he comes on the show, of course, but no. Okay, Team 3. What do we got? Papa Smithy says, Cloud9, TSM, and TL is the top 3. Nice new analysis. That's what it's all about, is coming up with new things that people haven't said before. Number 3, I have TSM. I also don't think this should surprise anybody, given what we've come up to at this point, knowing that TSM hasn't been said yet, and those are the top 3 teams. So I have them as a ±2. I think anything at this level of the rankings, anyone from teams 1 to 4 has a chance to win the LCS, depending on how things play out. So giving them a ±2, I think, shouldn't be too much of a surprise. I do think there is a chance that some things don't work out and they drop a little bit, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. So TSM obviously went in with, they won the LCS in summer, they went to Worlds, they bombed at Worlds, but let's not talk about it. They had Broken Blade, Spica, Bjergsen, Doublelift, and they had the tandem of Biofrost and Treats. Biofrost ended the year with them starting at support. And what they've shifted around to, they've only got one player continuing because of the Bjergsen and Doublelift retirements, although there's a lot of context, of course, around that Doublelift retirement. But simple version, those 2 big pillars of their team retired. Now they have Huni, they have Spica, Power of Evil, Lost, and Sword Art. So, I can understand why people feel like TSM should have a much wider range of potential outcomes here. Because Huni especially had this year that was just a really strange kind of, I wouldn't even say a roller coaster ride, because I think from a very surface level perspective of it, I understand why people say they thought it was just like an all down pretty much all the time. He was horrible on Dignitas. He obviously wasn't taking Academy seriously and didn't look good in Academy. If you like to talk about Academy and say you've got this like someday test kind of concept that I know like Captain Flowers and some other people like to talk about, you want to go down to Academy and kind of destroy everybody there. And Huni didn't do that. He was trolling around a little bit. Like he was, you can generously say limit testing. He was not trying to play, min-max everything to win the most. He was just out there trying to stomp people and trying to style on people, and it wasn't working, because when you try to do that, they have all the same buttons to press as everybody else, so you can't just be like stronger than them and do silly things and win anyways. Like, that's not how the game works. So, but when he came up back to starting on EG in summer, and playing in the playoffs and so on, I've done a couple of VOD reviews of this and watched a lot of other games that I didn't record videos of, and he was, in my opinion, probably the best player on EG in the playoffs run. He was not just out there being this coin flip carry player. He does the right macro things. He can play weak side. He's a much I'm not saying Hooney is, and I try to be very clear on this. I'm not saying Hooney is like, you know, star player caliber anymore. He's not the old school Hooney who's gonna, you know, be contesting, you know, who's going to be able to play for T1 and go to World Finals and stuff like that. But he's not a terrible player. He's actually a pretty good player. And he's not going to throw away the games for you unless there's something really wrong going on behind the scenes. You know, maybe there's really bad team fit and the comms are bad and his attitude goes wrong. You know, I think those are things that might happen, but shouldn't. And honestly, I think if his voice was clashing with someone like Double Lift, I would say it had a higher chance of happening, but that's not going to be a problem. You know, maybe there are some other voices he ends up clashing with a little bit, but I'm not super concerned on that front. I think he's going to be a good fit and he's going to be pretty solid for them. And the other piece that people would look at here and say, here's a reason why I feel kind of concerned about TSM, or that they should be, you know, maybe a ±3 or 4 or whatever, is Lost, right? So but you know a little bit of what I think of Lost already, talking about EG and how they wanted to get him and how high I would have ranked EG if they got Lost. I think Lost is a really, really good player. He was arguably the best bot laner in Academy. He's had a little time in LCS before, so he's not coming in as a rookie, right? Like he's not going to be coming in with all these nerves and stuff that you'd normally associate with a rookie. And I think a lot of people in the community, just not being familiar with him, kind of associate those, kind of maybe even in the back of your head, you associate those things with Lost and go, oh, we just don't know what this guy's going to be. No, we have a pretty good idea of who this guy is and how he plays. And he, you know, he came pretty close to carrying TSM Academy to winning Academy. And he was the best player on that team pretty clearly. He is a great team fighter. He's really strong mechanically. From what I've seen, I think he's pretty good at, you know, freeing up his support to roam, and Treats was able to get out on the map a bit and play that way. I know others who have said that his laning isn't the best or incredible. I think his laning's pretty good. I think that's one thing we're going to have to see in how well he clicks with Sword Art on that front. But I think I think his strengths are his team fighting and, you know, not exposing himself too badly in lane. Those are the things that I've seen personally. And since Sword Art loves to roam and Power of Evil's super good at team fighting, and they've got Spica, who somehow I think is still underrated. And people, even though I've done like a Run It episode on Spica and, you know, how good he was and just how much he improved over the course of the summer split into the playoffs and all of that, and I think we're going to see that growth curve continue. I think this guy's really, really good, and he knows how to play to enable his lanes, and he knows how to play for what he needs as well. And I think with Spica and Sword Art going out there and playing the map, I think Lost and Hooney are going to be, you know, very serviceable, and Power of Evil is a strong mid laner. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and I want to be careful that people don't take me the wrong way on this. I think the main thing that is going to potentially hold TSM back, or rather the thing that needs to happen for them to really click and climb up into that kind of first place contention or going to the finals, is that Power of Evil's playstyle might need to change a little bit, because he's used to having a jungler like Santorin this year who was able to give him everything he needed and knew, this is how I help make sure that Power of Evil succeeds. And I'm not saying Power of Evil only succeeded because Santorin and Ignar as well, with his roaming, you know, gave him what he needed. He did a lot of this on his own and is a very strong player. But I think, you know, one of the reasons that Spica looked so good this year is because Bjergsen was so good at giving Spica what he needed and moving onto the map with him and like communicating with him, and being able to like pair up as a mid-jungle duo. I don't think Power of Evil is as good as Bjergsen in general, but he's also, especially, he's not as good as Bjergsen at, you know, connecting with the jungler, following the jungler to a play, or even leading the jungler to a play, things like that, which I think are going to be pretty important. And it's also just an important part of the game in general, especially as the game has continued to get refined. So Power of Evil is good enough, and he's in contention for best player on this team at least, but his style and the way he plays, I think, is going to need to be coached a bit, and Bjergsen's going to be coaching him, right? So that's a good sign. But I think that's going to be a bit of an adaptation that the team will need out of him, and if that happens, then I think things can be really great, and I think they can play really well. I have a little more confidence in them than I do in the 100 Thieves lineup, depending on meta. Of course, I think, you know, meta can always shift things between these teams. I think those two teams are going to be pretty close in power level. And then I think there's a bit of a gap going into the top two. So not a huge gap, a bit of a gap. And of course, you know what the top two teams are going to be that I'm going to talk about. But again, I'm going to just catch my breath for a second before we jump into them. What's going on in chat? Gielsier wants to know, how quote-unquote fudged are other top laners against Big Daddy Alfari? Beyond the top 5 teams, how hard will he outlane his opponents? I think Alfari could outlane most or all, probably all of the top laners. If it was just isolated 1v1, I think Alfari could probably outlane all the guys here, but I don't think that's the thing that makes you the best top laner. And we're going to talk about both Cloud9 and TL and have some comments on both of their top laners in a minute here. So, yeah, no, Alfari could... he's very good in lane, for sure. And he's a very good player overall, so... All right. Should I run a poll on the order of my top 2 teams? Or would that be delaying things too much and stretching out the suspense? So to do that, I would need to open up this guy. Let's see. So we're going to ask, who is number 1 in my rankings? I'm curious what people are going to predict. All right, let's go. We're going to make this a quick one. You guys, 1 minute to vote. What do you think? Where did this land? So Podent is wondering, how can a team be 3rd and get a B and another team be 4th and get an A? Well, and I've tried to explain this going in that my off-season grades try to factor in the resources you had, existing player contracts and so on, and the budget you have, and all of those kinds of things versus what you ended up with. I think 100 Thieves had, and I guess as I'm realizing this, I talked a lot about TSM as a competitive team, but I didn't really talk about my off-season grade for them. So maybe I'll take a second for that. But 100 Thieves, I think, had quite a lot of resources, but even still, they have a ton of depth and really good resources they ended up with. And I think they made really good use of what was in front of them. TSM get a B. Yeah, and I didn't actually speak to this. I gave TSM a B for their off-season because of the signs that were there that... I'll speak about the poll results in a moment as well. The signs that were there that said they wanted Double Lift to be their plan A, but... then things went weird with the Sword Art deal. According to what Double Lift has said in his content and stuff like that, it seems what happened was they said, we're going to bring in Double Lift, we're going to add Sword Art, we're going to do these other moves. Then things were going a little weird with the Sword Art deal. Double Lift said, apparently, I'm not going to play unless it's Sword Art. TSM may not have, whether it's TSM saying, we don't like that, so we don't want you anymore, or Double Lift just going ahead and following through and retiring, whatever it was. And then TSM said, okay, fine, we'll hold on to Lost. We had been planning to sell Lost, but now we're going to hold on to him. And I don't think that, I've been saying since, for over a month now that I thought Lost should have been their plan A. That's how high my opinion of him is. And also that I think Double Lift improved his performance towards the end of the year and found out, a little more of a comfort level with playing Senna and playing weak side and allowing Speaking of Bjergsen to play through Broken Blade's side of the map a lot more, which was much more effective for them as a team. And so Double Lift did kind of, I think, curve back upwards a little bit towards the end of the year. But even so, he was not performing on a classic Double Lift level. And I think, Lost is... So, and I think the phrase I actually used in the written version of this, I think Lost is an unintentional upgrade for TSM at the bot lane position. Double Lift obviously has a lot more experience and leadership and things like that, but I don't think this TSM roster needs experience and leadership. They just need the best mechanical skill they can in that position because they've got all these other players who can lead. And they brought in Sword Art, and that's some of his strongest qualities. So I think they ended up with the best outcome for them, but not on purpose is how it seems. And that really kind of runs me a little bit the wrong way. So the poll, 53% of you think I've got Cloud9 number 1, 47% think I have Team Liquid number 1. That's very close. I'm a little surprised it's that close, but not that surprised. I think just about everybody's going to have these two teams in the top 2. All right. My number 2 is Team Liquid. Okay. Team Liquid, ±1. I think they're going to be very stable at the top 3, and I give them a B+. So they came into the offseason, Impact, Broxa, Jensen, Tactical, Core JJ. They signed Jensen to an extension. They let Broxa and Impact go to free agency, and they sign in Alphari and Santorin. Now, we've been, on the Oracle's Elixir Discord, we've been talking about TL signing Alphari and Santorin for months and months. That's why I can't go into the A range on this. Like, it was pretty obvious, right? Like, here's the org that has some of the most money out there and is just always ready to sign, pay big for the best free agents. Alphari is pretty popularly perceived as the, maybe the best top laner in Europe, and he's a free agent. So bring him over. Like, of course, why not? Santorin was perceived by a lot of people, and I'm not necessarily saying I agree, as the best jungler in LCS, and he's a free agent, so sign him. I think he was a top 3 jungler, but I didn't vote him #1 Summer All-Pro. But he's a good jungler. So it's kind of obvious, but they went out and they did it, and they executed it, so they get pretty good marks for that. So I think this is a roster that is going to just straight up out-skill or like out-execute pretty much everybody else in the LCS. But I think they will be, this is going to sound a lot more negative because I'm going to be speaking to Travis Gafford. Thank you for the tier 1 subscription. I'm going to be speaking a lot to why I don't have TL #1. So it's going to sound a lot more negative than it actually is. But I've got them #2, and I think they're really good, and I think it's a big improvement on what they had in 2020, right? So don't misread the tone of all the stuff I'm going to say here. But and Fly also subscribed with Prime. Thank you. I did have stream alerts turned on, but they must have somehow turned off or not being in this scene or something like that. I don't know. I'm a noob at OBS and Twitch, so I did have stream alerts. So yeah, I think that Team Liquid, they're just gonna be able to, like, if they just play straight up and kind of play things out. Another one. Stop interrupting my train of thought, guys. No, actually do it. And we've got a hype train started. Frozen Creek 69. Thank you for the Prime sub. So yeah, let's finish this top 2 strong with a big old hype train. I hope everybody can see what that's going on there. I think that TL, yeah, if they just play a straight up game, Andy 3241, thank you for a 2-month sub with Prime. But what I'm not convinced in with Team Liquid is you can use a German word here, the Gestalt. So, whoa. And I'm going to have to pause a little bit on that while you guys all Google Gestalt. No, you don't have to, and I'm sure most of you already know it already. Leroy Lemon, thank you for the Prime sub. Legit Ace for the win, thank you for the Prime sub. Izani, thank you for the sub. So what I'm not convinced with the Team Liquid is that they're going to be able to put all of their pieces together in a way where they really like multiply each other and make everybody else on the team become better than they can be. We're up to a level 3 on the hype train. I had another alert, but I don't see it in my feed. Maybe that's just alert for the hype train. Anyways, very exciting. Trying to keep the energy level up here. But I'm being pulled in so many directions. And I think, Core JJ is the only player of these 5 who I really see as somebody who goes out and like does things that make the rest of the players on their team perform a lot better. I think Santorin is a guy who plays a lot on script. Empire, wow, 20 gifted subs. That's incredible. Thank you so much. Santorin is a guy who is a jungler who's really good at playing to script. Like, here, I am this champion, my teammates are this champions, and here's the map state, here's what I'm supposed to do. And that's one reason he was very good for Power of Evil. Like, Power of Evil needs me to do this, and I'm going to do it. I think Jensen is kind of that as a mid laner as well. And I think Alphari is kind of that as a top laner as well. And I think the bot lane role is one that, just by design, is not great as kind of a multiplier or enabler kind of a role. Even though I think Tactical has a little more of that ability than some players to kind of go off script and make a big flashy play and suddenly bring something out. Now, Core JJ is incredible as this, at this. So, maybe he can do it all on his own. But, it's something where the rest of the team, I'm not sure, it'll all play out that way. Now, we're on a level 5 hype train. If we hit the max on this, I'll be completely blown away. But I've been blown away by a lot of this already, and that is so many people are in here watching, and I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, again, this is all very much kind of like I'm justifying why I have Team Liquid 2, not 1. And it sounds very negative, but I think this team's going to be great. I think the players are really strong. Whoa, 5 more gifted subs. Thanks, CS Warrior. And we now have 2.5 minutes on the last level of the hype train. Space Alpaca, thank you for the Prime sub. I hope I haven't missed anybody. But I probably have missed some people. And I'm getting pinged constantly by all these notifications, and it's... Wow. Oh, hi, Vega. Thank you for the Prime sub. I also see a lot of people. Max Waldo's in the chat. Yeon is. I think I see NXI as well. Hope you guys are all... Anybody who's on a bottom 5 ranked team, don't take it personally, and I hope you all succeed. I hope everybody can be number 1. My kids are going to get sushi tonight. Oh, can you imagine me trying? I can't imagine feeding my kids sushi. My second oldest, like... We have to like cut up 3 or 4 little bites of meat every meal and like force him to eat them because he will not eat meat. But I don't know, kids are hard to feed. Thorges, thank you for the Prime sub. Trying to catch my breath a little bit here so that I can continue this, but I know the next time I launch into a complex sentence, I'm going to get pinged like 3 times. Okay, so I did give Team Liquid a B+, and like I think I said, it's kind of because their moves were relatively obvious and just kind of like, yeah, here's what you do. Okay, do it. You did it. Great. I can't give you too much credit for that and go into the A range. We have 54 seconds left on the hype train, by the way, if anybody thinks we can... Wait, does that mean we achieved level 5 hype train? Somebody explain to me what happened here, because I don't see a meter moving up. We already got it. We peaked it out. Wow. I did not think that was possible. So that's what the 323% means. So well, let it pump higher. Gleus, thank you for the Prime sub. And Kopis, thank you for the Prime sub as well. Quite Dwarf, thank you for the Prime sub. Wow. The Perpetuator, thank you for the Prime sub too. Well, so I definitely did not expect that this stream would achieve anything near like this, but this has been awesome. Thank you all for hanging out. And we're going to push through to the end here in a second. So we ended the hype train with a 407% exceeding. Wow. Magimike, thank you for the Prime sub as well. If I missed anybody, ping me in the chat, and I hope I'll notice it. The YouTube VOD of this is going to be so clean and smooth, I can tell. Okay, back to the task at hand. Yeah, and can anybody predict who's going to be the number 1 spot? I give them a B+ and not just a B, because I think I would have given them just a B if it was like based only on the LCS moves. But I think they also did some improvements at the academy level as well that pushed me from the B to the B+. So their academy roster for next year: Jenkins, Grig, Harry, Yeon, and Ayla. I think it's Yeon, not Yeon, but I can't help but not say Yeon. I think this is an improvement on what they had in Academy in 2020. But to be clear, I felt, yeah, and it's Armau, no, not Greg, sorry. I hadn't changed that in my spreadsheet yet, so I just read what I had written down. I'll change it right now. There we go. And I misspelled it, so I got to fix it. It's an improvement on what they had in Academy for 2020, but I want to be clear, they had maybe the worst Academy program in 2020. Partly that might be because they had to move tactical up in spring, and that kind of threw everything off. But I also think that they made some choices, and also their initial investment wasn't great, and they just seemed to not care that much. Like, I'm not criticizing the people who were involved in their academy team or like the level of contribution they made, but just the amount of resourcing and the amount of like priority that Team Liquid appeared from the outside to put into like how important academy is to them. It just didn't strike me as being that important. So now they have Yeon, and they have Ayla, and these are a couple of players that could turn out pretty well. I think Jenkins showed some things that made him worth kind of keeping around. Like Harry, I don't know a ton about, and that's one of the players I need to learn a little more about. But I think it's an improvement. I think getting Spawn to coach from Australia, I think that shows that, you know, they've got some importance to this and they've got some priority on it. So, you know, in general, it seems like they're making more of an effort. I'm not sure if they're going to run an amateur team. I hope they will. And they seem like one of the orgs that would. But it seems like they're making a little more of an effort to build a talent pipeline. And so I'd go from a B to a B plus on them there. So where does their academy team finish? Guess Spawn is in the chat. I don't even know all the academy rosters yet, so I can't even say that. It's going to take me a lot more time to sit back and like study a lot of the players I know very little about before I can make any predictions on academy finishes. Okay, so now the big reveal, what everybody's been waiting for. We'll pull the curtain off and see who's the rank 1 team in my 2021 preseason power rankings. Oh, but hold on. Spawn is making a bet with Papa Smithy in the chat that TL Academy will beat 100 Thieves Academy. So you've all seen it. It's now written down and recorded. They have a, you know, we're going to hold them to whoever actually wins that. And I'm pretty sure, depending on which continent each of you is living on at the time, you're going to have to fly to the other person's house. I'm pretty sure I saw you guys write that part down as well, so it's a contract. Okay, rank number 1. Obviously, Cloud9. And, you know, get your trolls out. I got a ±2. Yes, they can finish, you know, they can finish 2 spots above first. Ha ha ha. Spawn says he should be in the US at the start of the split. Awesome. I hope so. I hope that works out well and that it's safe for you to do so, because that would be good. Okay. ±2 because it's actually obviously the -2 side of it, but I don't want the visual asymmetry. And if I could have figured out how to get OBS to line up all of the letter grades to the far right, and it wouldn't have taken me more than 2 minutes to do it, I would have done that as well. Anyways, Cloud9, they went in with Licorice, Blabber, Niski, Sven, and Vulcan, and they are now running with Fudge, Blabber, Perks, Sven, and Vulcan. So 2 players changing, and I think this is an incredibly high potential lineup. If you think I'm kind of high on Lost, and that you know, him coming out of Academy into LCS is something I'm excited about, I'm more excited about Fudge. He was the best player in Academy for the length of the year. I felt like in spring, like I gave out like unofficial MVPs and all-stars, things like that. I gave Fudge the unofficial MVP in summer. I gave King the unofficial MVP in spring, and I thought King was, you know, a little better than Fudge, but Fudge was in that conversation still. I think he's a guy who can play all the different styles that you need. He seems to be leaning a little more towards the carry side, but, you know, played lots of Ornn and Set and did well on those things as well. I think he showed a lot of growth over the course of the year. He went from being kind of a secondary option in spring when King was like the big focal point of the team into being the number 1 option in summer, and getting a lot more shut down by draft and by in-game pressure and enemy jungler and things like that. And he still kind of found ways to work around that. There were quite a few games where he got shut down pretty hard early and got attacked a lot and set behind, and then still found ways, like on, you know, big Wukong team fights and stuff like that, and didn't just kind of fade away and go away, and still was really good. You know, so maybe the first half of his game wasn't great, but he found a way to be really good in the second half, which is huge, especially from a young player. And Fudge isn't even the biggest story for this roster, obviously. That's Perks. I have a video out on YouTube where I talked when this wasn't official yet, but when it was kind of coming out, that Cloud9 might be signing Perks, and this is when the number being tossed around was, oh, they're asking $5 million US to buy him from G2. And so I had something out there saying, oh, I think this would be like a B+ move, like it's pretty good, but I'm not completely convinced it's worth it. But a lot of time has gone by since that video came out. The actual buyout number seems to have come down a bit from there. And also, I've just had more time to reflect on the context that went into this move. And obviously, I ended up giving Cloud9 my only A, like actual A, not an A- of the offseason. And it's because Cloud9 set themselves up really well to make this investment and to throw everything on the table and say, no, we're going to go for Perks. We're going to spend this money, because they were able to sell Licorice and promote Fudge because they had him in their system. They got a little, you know, lucky that way with the rule change that Oceanic players can now be considered domestic in the LCS. So they now had the option of promoting Fudge and still having Perks and Sven as imports. But they had that in their system to work with. So they were able to sell Licorice. They were able to sell Palafox and Diamond out of their academy team. These guys were ready to make the jump to LCS, but couldn't do it in Cloud9. So what are you going to do? Let them sit around and win academy again? Like, no, these were resources, and you got some money off of that and used that to help pay for this move. They set themselves up really well as an organization to make this move. So even if it is arguably a bit of an overspend, they were able to make that because they put themselves in position to do it. So I think some of the leaning B plus-ish, feeling a little negativity that I had before, it's something that I'm walking back on a little bit now, and I feel a lot better about than I did back when I made that original video. This is a team where, when I looked at the TL lineup and I said, I'm not sure if they have, other than Core JJ, I think the rest of these guys are kind of like additive players is how I would put it. Like, they're going to play out their script the proper way, and kind of do the right job that's in front of them. Cloud9 has all kinds of multiplicative players who are going to be able to go off script in good ways and try things that you wouldn't expect. Vulcan is that kind of a player. I think Blabber is somewhat that kind of a player. I think Fudge has shown ways that he can do that, and Perks, I think, is like the epitome of that. G2 as a team were an off-script kind of a team. They do so many things, whether it's comeback attempts or closeout attempts or whatever it is. They do stuff where they would just go so far off script and catch you off guard and make a big play, and sometimes that would bite them, right? That's the whole thing with when you go off script, it can go negative, it can fail, and it can end up making you look bad. But it's also the way that you become a great team and go from good to great. And G2 were so good at that. And Perks, I think, was kind of the heart of that. He was the core of it, from what I can see from the outside. And so when he comes into this team and comes back to his natural mid lane position, and when he played mid in spring, I think he was really good. And he's probably not mechanically as good as Caps. Like, he may not be as good of a straight mid laner as Caps. I think Caps is a better individual player. But Perks strikes me as the more of the stronger mental side of it, the more creative side of it. Both of them are really good at that, so I'm not saying anything negative about Caps. And you can watch, in fact, the Run It episode we did during Worlds on Caps talks a lot about the things that Caps did, kind of not just standing in mid lane and doing his job, but going out and playing the map for his team and stuff like that. So he's also very good in that. But I think Perks is a little, maybe half a notch above Caps on that, and I think we'll be able to take this entire team and level it all up so much. And it's not all on him because there are so many other playmakers and people who can do stuff on this team. So I think they have a ton of room to grow really high. I think there is a chance that it doesn't pan out and maybe they drop to second or third, but I'd be shocked if they don't go to Worlds. And I'm just, I'm buying so high on what they can achieve. And they've also still got, I think they're resetting a little bit on their academy kind of system. Obviously, they've moved up Fudge, they've moved out Palafox and Diamond. Tomo has moved on. And they've reset their entire academy, so now they're running Zion Spartan, Surenfire, Copy. They still have King there, and Isles. So, and that's where, it's not quite the same level of, like, there's a little more veterancy there and a little bit less kind of rookie status there than they've had in Academy in the past. But I don't think that's a big problem. They still have King as a huge piece that they can either set up for, at the end of next year, either the price on him goes really high and they can sell King this year, or next year maybe they move on from Zen and promote King, or they keep Zen and move out King, something like that. Like, they've done this with so many other players, and I think it's smart of them to hold on to him as a resource. Copy is a player who I think has a lot of potential coming in as a rookie out of 100 Thieves Next. And then Surenfire and Isles, I think, are players we know a little bit more about who they are and what they can bring. But I think this lineup is going to aim to win Academy. I don't know for sure that they will, or they might not be the favorites, but they're going to be in the conversation at least. And Cloud9 also has an amateur team, so they still have a talent pipeline going on. I think it's taken a little bit of a step back, but that's why they built it up, so they could leverage those resources. So on the whole, I give Cloud9 an A. I think they are going to be the best team in the LCS by kind of playoffs and end of summer time for sure. Maybe it's going to take them a little longer to click and come together, but that's how I feel about them. So we got to the end of it. What a ride. Thanks for watching my LCS 2021 preseason power rankings. For a more structured approach to things, make sure you check out the written version, which is linked in the description below. And come hang out in the Oracle's Elixir Discord server as well, where we love to chat through these kinds of topics. See you next time.